The SEAL Admiral looked at the black janitor and laughed. "So, warrior, what's your code name?" he asked, loud enough for the entire cafeteria to hear. Forks stopped. Conversations died. Heads turned. He pointed at the man in the faded janitor's uniform, wiping down a table with calm, steady hands. "Come on," the Admiral smirked. "You must have one. Corporal Broom? Sergeant Mop?" Laughter rippled through the Coronado Naval Base cafeteria. Young soldiers laughed too loudly, eager to show they were on the right side of the joke. A few older ones stayed silent, eyes narrowing, reading the room. And the man, the janitor James Washington, 45, dark skin, worn boots, quiet eyes that had seen more than most, didn't flinch. He straightened slowly, rag in hand, and looked the Admiral directly in the eye. For a moment, the base went completely silent. And then, in a voice calm enough to chill the air, he said, "My code name was Lone Eagle." The laughter stopped as if someone had cut the sound. One young soldier at the third table inhaled sharply. He'd heard that name before. Not on TV, not in some movie. In whispered stories between SEALs during late-night training. Lone Eagle. The ghost operator. The man who went in alone and came back with everyone else. For the first time, the smirk on Admiral Grant Marshall's face flickered. He stared at the janitor, searching for a joke in his expression. He didn't find one, because in front of him stood the man everyone thought was a legend. A rumor, a myth from classified files. And the Admiral had just tried to humiliate him over a mop. If you want to see how this story ends, how the man they mocked as a cleaner turned out to be one of the most dangerous and respected soldiers in U.S. history, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because what happens next is a masterclass in quiet revenge, dignity, and justice. James didn't raise his voice. He didn't puff his chest. He just said those two words, Lone Eagle, and went back to wiping the table as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. The younger soldiers looked at each other, confusion and recognition mixing in their eyes. Lone Eagle was the operator they'd heard about in whispers. The one-man rescue missions, the impossible extractions, the classified files stamped with thick black ink. The Admiral forced a laugh, trying to regain control of the room. "Lone Eagle?" he repeated, mocking. "Seriously? You think anyone here is going to believe that?" He raised his voice, playing to his audience again. "You hear that, boys? Our janitor thinks he's a special ops legend. A broom in one hand, a mop in the other, flying into combat. What's next? You gonna tell us you trained John Wick too?" The cafeteria laughed again, but this time it sounded thinner, more forced. James just looked at him with that same steady calm. He wasn't offended, he wasn't shaken. He'd been shot at by people who really wanted him dead. Words meant nothing. But one thing did matter. The Admiral had made it personal. 2 years ago, after his wife died in a car accident and he was left alone to raise his 12-year-old daughter Zoe, James had taken the only steady job he could get on base, janitor, because rent doesn't care about medals. Groceries don't accept hero stories as payment, and his daughter needed stability, not legends. Admiral Grant Marshall didn't know any of that. To him, James was just the help, just another black man pushing a cart and cleaning up after real men. And he loved an audience. "Tell me something, Washington," the Admiral said, strolling around him like he was inspecting a stain. "You tell your little girl this story too? Daddy the secret war hero?" A few people shifted uncomfortably. Others still laughed. James' jaw tightened, just a little. "My daughter," he said quietly, "knows exactly who I am." Marshall grinned, thinking he'd found the weak spot. "Of course she does," he mocked. "A janitor whose biggest mission is unclogging toilets. What's she gonna do when she finds out you're just a liar?" That was the moment. Not the first insult, not the Sergeant Mop line, not even the racial digs he'd made over the past year. It was when he dragged Zoe into it, because Lone Eagle could take a lot of hits, but not there. Around them, not everyone was laughing anymore. Commander Torres watched from the corner, eyes narrowed. He'd served long enough to know that true operators didn't brag. They stayed small. They watched everything. Sergeant Williams, a Special Operations NCO, stared at James's posture. The relaxed shoulders, the controlled breathing, the way his hands stayed loose, not clenched. That was not how a bitter, defeated janitor stood. That was how a trained operator stood when he was choosing not to react. He was too busy enjoying the sound of his own voice. "People like you," he said, leaning closer, should understand their place. Some of us were born to lead. Some of us were born to clean up after those who lead. That's life. James held his gaze. He didn't blink. He didn't move. And then he did the one thing that terrified men like Marshall more than any punch. He smiled. A small, calm, almost dangerous smile. Then he picked up his cart and walked out of the cafeteria. The Admiral laughed behind him, talking about delusional janitors and wannabe soldiers. But some of the people in that room weren't laughing. They were thinking. And James, he was planning. That night, at his small kitchen table, while Zoe worked on her homework, James opened his old laptop. Zoe chewed her pencil, frowning at an algebra problem. "Dad," she said, "you're staring at the screen again. You're supposed to be helping me." He blinked, snapped out of his thoughts, and smiled. "Sorry, baby girl, show me the problem." He leaned in and explained the equation step by step, gentle and patient, the same way he'd taught younger soldiers how to read terrain, plan routes, and clear rooms. But in the background, his mind was doing what it did best, building an operation, because James Washington wasn't just Lone Eagle the operator. Before that, he'd been something even more dangerous, a military intelligence analyst. His specialty? Mapping corruption networks, reading patterns, connecting dots, and then quietly taking down men who thought they were untouchable. For 2 years as a janitor, James had watched. He knew which contractors were overbilling the Navy and which officers were signing off on it. He knew which young soldiers were being punished for things they didn't do and who was pulling the strings. He was dirty and arrogant, the worst combination. James had quietly recorded racist rants he heard while cleaning the Admiral's office. He'd photographed suspicious documents accidentally left open on desks. He'd watched who came in and out at odd hours. But until now, he'd kept it all to himself. He didn't want attention. He wanted peace, a life for Zoe. But Marshall had crossed the line. Now it wasn't just about him. It was about every young soldier humiliated, transferred, or crushed under this man's ego. The next morning during his break, James walked into the base communications center. "Morning, Mr. Washington," said Sergeant Carmen Martinez, looking up from a pile of reports. She was one of the few who had always treated him like a human being and not furniture. "Morning, Carmen," James said quietly. "Got a minute? I need to show you something." She saw his face. It wasn't anger. It wasn't complaint. It was mission mode. She led him into a small back room and closed the door. Over the next 20 minutes, James showed her everything. Photos on his phone, audio recordings of Marshall's jokes, notes on transfers, contracts, names, dates, times. Carmen's expression changed from curiosity to shock to fury. "My God," she whispered. "James, this is career-ending stuff. Why tell me?" "Because," he said, "you control the communications. And Marshall has a video call with the Pentagon this afternoon about officer evaluations, right?" She nodded slowly. "Yeah, 3 generals. Big deal." "He likes an audience," James said. "And when he thinks no one above him is watching, he talks more. A lot more." Carmen frowned. "You think he'll expose himself?" James gave that same small, knowing smile. "He won't be able to help it." The plan was simple and deadly. Carmen would activate a little-used secure recording function on the video system technically allowed under certain circumstances. James, using his janitor's access, would plant a small audio recorder in Marshall's office. Then he'd do the most dangerous thing of all, push the Admiral just enough to make his true self come out in front of the generals. That afternoon at 2:30 p.m., Admiral Marshall adjusted his medals in the mirror, practicing his serious, responsible leader face. He sat down ready to impress the brass. Right before the call, James knocked on the door and poked his head in. "Admiral, sir, just here to do a quick clean before your conference." Marshall didn't even look up. "Fine, just don't break anything with those big hands." James quietly stepped in, pushing his cart, while Marshall flicked through his notes. As he dusted, James spoke with deliberate calm. "Admiral, do you really believe people like me shouldn't have served?" Marshall leaned back, happy to educate. "Look, Washington, it's not personal, it's reality. Some people are born leaders. Some people are born to support, genetic limits, cultural limits. You found a job that fits your capabilities. That's good. You should be proud. And your daughter? She should keep her expectations realistic." James's fingers tightened on the cloth. Just for a second. "Of course, sir," he said softly. "Thank you for your honesty." He left the office. What Marshall didn't know was that Carmen had already opened the audio channel 5 minutes early, and the three generals on the other end had just heard part of that honesty. At 2:45 p.m., the call officially began. Three faces appeared on the large screen. General Thompson, General Williams, General Hayes. Decorated men who'd seen too much to be easily impressed. Admiral Marshall, Thompson said, we're here to review officer performance and any concerns regarding conduct on your base. Yes, sir, Marshall said, straightening in his chair. I have several cases that require special discipline. Some people just don't fit our elite standards. General Williams' expression hardened. Before we proceed, he said, we'd like you to clarify some comments we heard prior to this call about genetic limitations and people knowing their place. Marshall felt the blood drain from his face. But arrogance is stubborn. General, he said, forcing a smile, I'm just being practical. We all know some demographics are better suited for certain roles. It's not hatred, it's statistics. We can't pretend everyone is capable of elite leadership. All of it, recorded. All of it, heard. At 3:03 p.m., there was a knock on his door. Come in, Marshall barked, annoyed. The door opened. This time James didn't walk in with a mop. He walked in with a folder, straight-backed, eyes clear, a man who'd finally stopped hiding. Sorry to interrupt, Admiral, he said, stepping into the frame of the camera. But I believe the generals should hear from me as well. Marshall exploded. Washington, get out! This is a classified... Admiral, General Thompson's voice came cold and sharp. Let him speak. James turned toward the camera. Generals, he said, my name is James Washington, former Major, United States Army, Special Operations Command, code name Lone Eagle. I served under General Thompson between 2015 and 2019. Thompson leaned forward, eyes wide. Son of a James, is that really you? Yes, sir. Operation Thunderstorm, 17 hostages alone. Yes, sir. Marshall stared between the screen and the man in his office, as if reality had just broken. That's impossible, he stammered. He's a janitor. He's lying. James calmly opened the folder and held up documents to the camera commendations, mission orders, photos in uniform with generals, all with official seals. For the past 2 years, he continued, I have worked here as a janitor, caring for my daughter after my wife's death. During this time, Admiral Marshall has repeatedly humiliated me, made racist remarks, and treated soldiers and civilian staff like garbage. He lifted a small recorder. I have 47 audio recordings of his comments, including the statistics speech you just heard, and I have documentation of suspicious contracts, punitive transfers, and malicious harassment. Generals, James finished quietly, this is not about hurt feelings. This is about whether a man who thinks like this should be trusted with command. Silence. Then General Williams spoke. Admiral Marshall, he said, voice like ice, you are hereby suspended pending a full investigation. All relevant files and recordings will be transferred immediately. Major Washington, thank you for having the courage to bring this forward. Marshall stumbled backward, collapsing into his chair. You can't do this to me, he whispered. General Thompson's eyes were cold. Actually, Admiral, we just did. Oh, and about my daughter? She's proud of me. Not because I was Lone Eagle, but because, even after everything, I chose to keep my dignity. He left the office. This time, it wasn't as a janitor. It was as a man who had just ended a career without raising his voice. 6 months later, James walked the same halls of the base wearing a different uniform. Not camouflage. A dark formal one with new rank insignia and a small badge that read, Special Advisor, Pentagon Elite Operations. He didn't ask for the job. The Pentagon insisted. The military didn't just want Lone Eagle back. They wanted the man who took down a corrupt admiral without firing a shot. Dad! Zoe ran up to him after school, her backpack bouncing, a gold math medal around her neck. Guess what? My teacher says if I keep my grades up, I could get a scholarship to MIT. James laughed and hugged her tightly. Of course you can, he said. You can go anywhere you want. As they walked, soldiers saluted him. Officers nodded with real respect. Civilians greeted him by name. Carmen Martinez, now promoted to head of communications, hurried over with a folder. James, the Naval Academy called again, she said, smiling. They want you to give another lecture on leadership. The cadets won't stop talking about the last one. Zoe's eyes sparkled. Are you going to go? She asked. James looked around the base. The same walls. Across town in a small plain apartment, Grant Marshall taped up another box. Dishonorable discharge. Pension gone. No consulting jobs. No security clearances. No invitations. Just silence and the echo of his own words replaying online, shared as a warning. He tried to blame others. The system, politics, soft leadership. But deep down, he knew he did this to himself. One ego, one mouth, one belief that some people were beneath him. He was wrong. Back at the Naval Academy, James stood on a stage in front of hundreds of young cadets. He didn't tell them about medals. He didn't brag about kill counts or missions. He told them about mops, about humiliation, about cleaning floors while people laughed behind his back. And then he told them about choices. The man who tried to break me, he said, looking out over the crowd, believed your worth comes from your rank, your color, and the power you have over others. He was wrong. Your worth comes from your character, from what you do when nobody's watching, from how you treat the people who can't do anything for you.
He paused.
And sometimes, the janitor you're mocking is the one who once risked his life so you could wear that uniform. The applause was long, loud, and real. Grant Marshall tried to destroy James Washington. Instead, he destroyed his own career and exposed his own ugliness to the world. James didn't need to scream, threaten, or hit back in rage. He waited. He documented. He chose the right moment. And then he let the truth do what the truth always does. It took everything away from the man who lived on lies. The greatest revenge is not to hurt the people who hurt you. It's to become everything they said you never could be without becoming like them. If this story of dignity, justice, and quiet strength touched your heart, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who needs a reminder. Being underestimated isn't a weakness. In the right hands, it's a weapon